Hey guys, it's Dani. Today we're gonna be working with my sick little Cattleya orchid here, which I just ordered, I just received, and as you can see, we are dealing with quite the situation. This orchid has a lot of dying tissue, it's rotting. Part of it was because it was cold outside, but I feel like most of this damage is caused by the fact that it was packed soaking wet and the paper around it got very wet, and on transport, bacteria and other pathogens accumulated and started to wreak havoc on this little orchid. I do, however, believe it is savable because we have some good pseudobulbs, that's always important. We can always lose the leaves. Of course, the orchid will be set back, but it's not going to be completely destroyed. The new growths are destroyed, but that's okay. These orchids can produce multiple new growths. So today I intend to save as many pseudobulbs as I possibly can, and I'll take you along to see how I go about things. Okay, the first thing we need to do is on-pot this orchid. I want to change the setup, the medium, everything. I want to spray from head to toe this orchid. You'll see why. And to make sure that I will be removing the medium properly from the roots, I wetted it yet again. This is pure sphagnum moss. And in the meantime, while it was sitting in my grow space, it got a little bit more dry. So just like with any other unpotting, I will squeeze a little bit the pot. This appears to be a very old pot. You can see it's very brittle. This is what happens to plastic that is not UV resistant in time. It just becomes brittle and pretty much falls apart. One thing that I like to do with these flimsy pots is just go to the bottom of the pot. You'll see you have a very big drainage hole. Just try to pinch it and pull, and pretty much the pot just comes right off and the roots are not very damaged. You can do the very same thing with the transparent pots as well, you know, the flimsy ones. To be fully honest, I don't know why they use those pots only with Phalaenopsis. Everybody thinks only Phalaenopsis are capable to photosynthesize through their root system, when in fact there are many species which can, Cattleyas included, but you know, with Cattleyas they use the black ones, which in my opinion are not very good because they attract a lot of heat, and if we're not careful we can actually cook the roots of the orchid. The roots appear to be pretty okay, I've seen worse. But now it's time to remove the sphagnum moss, and that can be quite a chore. I will first try to remove it with my fingers, but if I find that it is very stuck and very compacted, I will get my trusty pinchers, or actually they're tweezers. Anyway, check the description down below. I'll share with you a video on how I like to remove very stuck sphagnum moss. With some orchids, it can work if you just remove it with your hands, but sometimes the moss is just so compacted and stuck that your fingers will most likely damage the root system. The tweezers are very thin and they can go into the crevices. We'll see what the case might be. I'm gonna speed this process up. Okay, so this orchid is not severely root bound, but already I heard a few roots snapping, meaning my fingers are already starting to damage them, which is not okay. I'm going to get my tweezers. Here we are. I removed as much of the old medium as possible, and I also rinsed the root system at the sink as best as possible. There are still some pieces of moss left, but we have too many roots here and they're too tangled, and many of them are dead. So to continue, I need to cut away the old roots. Now, I sterilize my pair of pruners. Usually I use alcohol and a flame, but a word of caution, be careful with fire. Everything that has alcohol will start to burn. It's not a very safe method, and if you are very young, please don't do this. Alcohol works just fine. I personally work with a great deal of sick orchids, and for my own peace of mind, I do use the flame as well, but typically for a normal orchid collection, just rubbing the blades of your cutting tool with a paper napkin soaked in alcohol does the job perfectly. So now let's go about cutting the old roots, and just like with any other orchid on Cattleyas, you will notice them because they're mushy. If you pull on them, they leave behind a string. These are all dead, and Cattleyas, in my opinion, do have quite sensitive roots if we are to compare them with Phalaenopsis, for example. So what I like to do is trace the root to as close to the rhizome as possible, if I can. Right now you see I have a mess here, so I don't think I can trace it, but I will go at the base and see what root is dead and just cut it from there, and then make my way to the bottom. So going close to the rhizome and cutting everything that I find dead typically works very, very well. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'll speed up the process and I'll come back when I'm done. Sometimes only some branches, let's call them like that, of the roots are dead, case in which I just cut that particular branch if the root feels firm. Sometimes you will see roots with their tip dead. In my experience, many of these roots will not continue to branch out, but who knows. We're dealing with a sick orchid. For now, I'm just going to cut the tip into the already dead part, so not from here, not in good tissue. If we do that, particularly on a Cattleya orchid, it means the end of the root, pretty much. So I'm going to try and save some of these roots, but with Cattleyas again, I find that they do have pretty sensitive roots. They're not very vigorous, they don't seem to bounce back, and they don't seem to continue living if we cut them, and so on and so forth. Alrighty, so I removed everything that I considered dead and very not healthy. I rinsed again the root system at the sink and I removed whatever bits and pieces of sphagnum moss I could find. So until now, pretty standard repotting procedures. Well, now is when it gets a little bit special. So I sterilized again my pair of pruners because this time we are going to cut leaves and new growths, sadly, which is something you obviously don't do when you repot orchids. So many of the leaves have already fallen because the infection reached the pseudobulb. Typically, this is where the infection stops. And I have an example to show you here. If you can see this pseudobulb, we still have a little bit of browning. These are remnants of the leaves. Typically, the infections don't go further than the pseudobulb. It is very rare that the pseudobulb can get infected from the leaves. Usually, pseudobulbs get infected from a wound in the pseudobulb. These leaves, if I let them on, they will go as well naturally, but I can also cut them. As long as I don't cut the pseudobulb, everything is okay. So that's what I am going to do now. I'm actually going to cut all of these leaves. So to cut the leaf, I need, this is snapping already, as you can see. I don't need to cut this one, maybe just a little string here. So I will try to go as close to the pseudobulb as possible without pinching the top of the pseudobulb and just cut the leaf. And you can see I left a little bit of the leaf behind. That is okay. In time, this portion will dry out and it will fall on its own. My main concern right now is to remove all of those accumulations of bacteria and pathogens. You can see the leaves, they're very, very affected. This is full of pathogens, so I want to remove that. A little bit of tissue behind, that's okay. But this leaf, I don't know if I want to remove it entirely. It looks pretty okay, to be honest. So with this one, I'm just going to remove the affected tissue and see what happens. So I need to go further down. In this case, we cut into good tissue, not like with orchids. So if I cut it here, I'm not gonna solve anything because I will leave infection behind. If I cut it right below it, again, it's not gonna be okay. You can see the yellowing. That is the infection going down. I need to cut where it's green. And in my case, I think it's here. So that's what I will do. And if I look at the orchid, I think I cut away all of these leaves that were just really, really rotten and really problematic. This leaf has a little bit of something here, but I'm just gonna let it be. Many of the times, an entirely good leaf can handle this, can stop it on its own. If I see it spread, I will carve it out, but I will leave the rest of the leaf be. It is a good leaf, it's gonna help us, it's gonna photosynthesize. For now, I'm not gonna do anything to it, I'm just going to disinfect it. So I think we're pretty okay with the leaves so far. This one looks okay, there's nothing to cut here. How about the new growth? Well, this is tricky too. The new growth, this particular one, seems to be rather stiff, and then it gets mushy here. This is because it was just forming. This pseudobulb was just forming. So what I need to do is remove, I'll try, I'm not sure if it's possible, try to remove a little bit these sheaths, to expose a little bit the pseudobulb, see what I have here. Yeah, and just like I thought, I have a green pseudobulb here, and the infection stops right here. Do you see the difference in color? That is where the infection stops, at this node. So for now, I'm not going to cut all of this away. I'm going to cut right above this. There is a chance this orchid can fix the infection on its own. I'm just going to help it a little bit. I'll cut right at the node. I'm not gonna cut the node. Let's see how we stand. Oh, it looks so green and nice. Just look at that. I think we did a good job. I think it's not infected yet. And I will leave this part behind because do you see this? we have eyes, you guys, and this is where a new growth will start. So if the infection would have come down a little more, I would have cut above this little node, or if it went a little further away, above this little node, this little section. Do you see it here? I would try to leave the base alone. Never would I try to do this. No, don't do that. If the base is formed, this is where a new pseudobulb can form. On the other hand, with this growth, I cannot do the same thing, because if we press on it, it's mushy all the way down, all the way here. So with this one, I will do this and call it a day. There was nothing to save here, do you see? It's already browning. So the base of it was already affected. Okay, so things are starting to look up. Another thing that I will do is remove all of these little sheets that the pseudobulbs have, because they're rather mushy as well. They have been wet, they are decomposing. No point in keeping them around the pseudobulb and letting them just attract pathogens really at this point. I want to spray this orchid and remove all of the spores. Whatever doesn't want to come off, it's okay. I'm not going to insist on it because I might actually damage the pseudobulb. Open wounds are not okay on this orchid at this point. She might be full of spores, of fungal spores. So with my fingers, whatever wants to come off, I will remove. Whatever doesn't, it's okay. As much of this dry material as possible, I will try to remove. Alrighty, I think we're good now. Next thing I'm gonna do is clean my table and actually disinfect it with alcohol before we move on. Alrighty, next up, it's time to use hydrogen peroxide 3%. This is the type you find in human pharmacies. It's the type you put on your wounds to make them close faster. I'm using a 3% concentration. You can find for sale higher concentrations than this. I would not recommend you put those ones on orchids. I'm comfortable only using the 3% concentration. If you find 6%, it's easy to dilute. Just get yourself distilled water from the supermarket is really good. Not the one you put in irons and it has perfume. Don't use that. Use distilled water or purified water. Anything that is not actually coming from the tap. Put the contents of the 6% bottle into a spray bottle, then add the same amount of pure water, and voila, you have yourself a 3% concentration solution from 6%. I will spray this orchid entirely with the hydrogen peroxide solution, very liberally. Roots, pseudobulbs, leaves, cut wounds, everything needs to be soaked. Hydrogen peroxide is a very, very good disinfectant for plants. It kills pathogens, bacteria, fungi, all of those stuff we don't want, including the fungal spores, which are present on this orchid. Every little crevice of this orchid needs to be sprayed. If you are working with hydrogen peroxide for the very first time, don't be afraid if you hear a little fuzzing. You will also see a little bit of boiling, let's call it like that. That is what you want to see and hear. This means the hydrogen peroxide is working, is acting. This is the initial reaction, after which all you will have left is water, and the extra oxygen will just be released into the air through the fizzing. So at this point, just let the orchid be, let it fizz. Don't rinse, don't do anything after hydrogen peroxide. I'm just going to go find a pot, prepare my medium, and I'll come back when I'm done. Alrighty, so I prepared my pot. As many of you know, I like to use self-watering pots. And this time I couldn't find my plastic mask, but what do you know? This ceramic decorative container works just great. Inside I have a normal pot, a plastic pot, with my little microfiber wick, and my preferred medium for Cattleyas is actually Leca, no other combination needed. So now, just like with any other repotting, it is time to arrange the orchid in the pot. I seem to be having two directions of growth which are opposed to each other. Not the best of situations, because you cannot put the orchid on one of the sides and think that it will continue to grow from here, because you're going to have new growth from here too. And if you put it in the middle, well, that's the best situation, that's what you should do, but it means you will have to repot this orchid due to size sooner rather than later. It's okay what to do. I would have preferred the new growths to be in one direction, let's say, so I could plant this orchid like this, but no, I will probably have a new growth from this side as well, probably. So I'll just center it in the pot and then just pour Leca around the orchid. And here we are pretty much done with repotting. We are not done with the orchid though. Remember, we have an open wound here. What I would typically do is just place a pinch of ground cinnamon on it. The one you purchase at the store, the one you put in the cookies. Some sources say that cinnamon powder has some antifungal, antibacterial properties. I don't know about that. That's not why I typically use it. I use it to make sure that this wound dries faster. Cinnamon actually is a desiccant, and tissue which is dry cannot reinfect. So that's the whole point of cinnamon, and I have been using it for years and years and years and years with pretty great success. But today we're gonna be trying something else. I was waiting for a moment like this. We're gonna try dragon's blood, which is a solution I've never worked with before, but some people here on YouTube seem to enjoy it. So I'm going to be placing a drop of this thing on my cut wound here. If you're ever in this situation and you don't have dragon's blood, that's okay, just use cinnamon. So what I will do is remove the excess moisture, the excess water from the cut wound here. You can see I already have some oxidation. That's okay. If you see the cut wound getting a little brown, don't worry, it doesn't mean it gets reinfected. Some Cattleyas actually change color of their tissue due to exposure to oxygen. So let me get you in closer. Here we go. So, okay, I think I will try to use this bottle as it is. It has a sort of a dropper shape. Hopefully I'm not gonna drop more than I should. So let's see. Gonna be placing one little drop here. So one thing I'm a little worried about is that this is liquid. I'm not sure how fast it dries or what it does, or if it remains liquid. We're gonna see. This is actually sap from a tree. It might transform into something gloopy. The problem is whatever is wet will accumulate bacteria. Even though this might be antiseptic, I'm not sure if its properties remain in time and so on. So I'm a little concerned about applying wet solutions that don't dry out. So don't take this as, yes, use this product because I vouch for it. Take it as I'm trying it out to see what happens. So I will be keeping a close eye on this orchid. And if I see the infection starting to spread again, pretty much what I will see is browning or yellowing of this little stem. I will cut again and I'll come back with cinnamon. I will make an update on it and tell you guys how it goes. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe this will just create a sort of seal. That's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping it will create a seal because this thing is actually a little denser than water. It is liquidy, but kind of gloopy. So hold on, we had another wound here. Typically, this is not necessary to seal off because it is actually already sealed. But since we're here, why not? Let's put a little drop here where I removed that growth as well. Okay, that's it. It's great that it doesn't actually run all over the place. I wouldn't want to put this on the roots. I don't know what effect it has, but we're gonna try out, we're gonna see what happens. And hey presto, we are pretty much done with saving this orchid. Now I will maintain this orchid ventilated. My grow space is actually ventilated, so no point in placing it in front of a fan or anything. If you're ever in this situation and you don't have constant ventilation in your home, just put a fan close to this orchid just so you have a little breeze, because the water will evaporate faster the less time it has to accumulate pathogens. Pretty much that's why crown rot, stem rot, all of those things happen because of water remaining there, not being dried by wind. Sometimes there's no ventilation in homes, and accumulating bacteria and pathogens which start to affect the orchid. Alrighty guys, so I will keep you up to date. Stay tuned for the dragon's blood situation. And I hope this will be useful to you if you're ever in this situation. And with that said, you know the drill. Like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. Also, if you're curious about the products that I use, the setups and all of that, I do list them in the description, so check them out there. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!